Now move to question time, and Senator Cadell.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. What is the total system cost of achieving the Anthony Albanese Labor government's 82% renewable energy target by 2030?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Gallagher.
Well, it is interesting that I should get a question on cost from the opposition. I mean, the nerve of these people announce a big energy policy, supposedly a scam. I don't think it actually stands up to the test of policy. And does it have any costs attached to it at all? No. Do they know how they'll roll it out? No.
Senator Cash.
Does anyone seem to agree with it? No, not many.
Minister Gallagher, please use your order. Senator Watt, order. Order across the chamber. Order. Senators, we are just a few minutes into question time. I have Senator Birmingham on his feet on a point of order, and I had to draw your attention to order on 3 or 4 occasions. Senator Birmingham.
President, point of order. Senator Cadell's question was quite specific, and whilst a degree of latitude may be given to ministers to talk about other matters or indeed opposition policies, the minister was asked about government costings. As the finance minister, I'd ask you to, now more than a quarter of the way into the time allowed, draw her to the question asked by Senator Cadell.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I will draw the minister back to the question. I'll also make the point that I expect the minister to be heard in silence. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I can understand Senator Birmingham's a bit sensitive about the issue of costs, considering as a former finance minister, I imagine you must find it quite difficult to be a member of a party that launches a policy without any costings at all. And I can assure the opposition, that our costs, that the price of continuing to proceed with renewable energy, which as everyone in this place knows and accepts is the cheapest form of energy, that the price of our continued steady rollout of renewables with firming capacity will be a lot less than whatever number you lot come up with whenever you get around to it. So,
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Order. Order. I've already had to draw the Senate back to order, particularly on my left. I asked for silence. That is what I expect. Minister Gallagher, did you have anything further to add?
And I will add that the figure that's being peddled by those opposite, including by the Leader of the Opposition, of $1.5 trillion, they can come up with a figure for something that's not their policy, but they can't come up with a figure for theirs, is completely false. Completely false. You are not telling the truth. And I would refer those opposite to the Integrated Systems Plan, where the ISP, which has looked at the costs of rolling out our plan to 2050 and have come up with a figure of $121 billion.
Senator Cadell's first supplementary.
Okay, we'll come under.
Not being able to give the answer to 2030, I would say, how much will your government be spending on loans, subsidies, equity and underwriting of renewable energy projects and enabling the infrastructure across Australia to achieve 2030?
Thank you, Senator Cadell.
How much?
Minister Gallagher. Minister, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber. Order. 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 Minister Gallagher.
President, wow, they are a little bit sensitive, aren't they? And wouldn't it be good, Senator Cadell, if you'd brought this forensic line of questioning to your own policy? I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did in that quick phone call in the party room when people just dumped this plan, unthought through, no costs, no idea how to deliver it. Did you stand up and go, how much is this going to cost as we roll this out? I can refer senators to the funding that's in the budget. In this budget, we are investing an extra $22.5 billion over the next decade to help make Australia a renewable energy superpower, including $3.2 billion for ARENA to promote clean energy innovation, $1.7 billion for the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund, $6.7 billion for hydrogen production tax credits. There's funding for the Hydrogen Head Start, the Capacity Investment Scheme, and this is in addition to the investments, the sensible investments we made in the last budget.
Has expired. Senator Cadell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, given you haven't been able to give a total system cost, aren't you being hypocritical? Aren't you?
Order. 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 Order on my right. Order. Order. Senator Cadell, please continue.
Aren't you being hypocritical in applying a different standard to opposition policy than you are on your own? If you can't tell the people how much your plans cost, why can you comment on ours?
Order. Order. Senator Watt. Order. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I do accept that it is hard to change a pre-written question on your feet in question time, President, but what I can say for those opposite and
Senator
all
O'Sullivan.
in this debate, we know that nuclear reactors are more expensive, nuclear energy will be more expensive, households will pay more. They will get the bill if we are to believe everything that you've already said to date. The cost will be more, households will pay for it, the generations of the future will pay for it if you can even get your policy agreed to. Our policy, our common sense, steady policy, rolling out renewables is better for households, better to address emissions, better for the climate, and is able to be delivered. Unlike yours, ours is costed. You have no costs. You can't give any detail about your fanciful plan or supposed plan.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister please outline what cost of living relief the Albanese government is delivering for all Australians? I am particularly keen to hear about the measures that come into effect in just 7 days' time, including tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer, the Albanese Labor government's $300 energy bill relief and wage rises for low-paid workers backed by the government.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you to Senator Smith from my home state of South Australia for that great question. And the senator is right. The Albanese Labor government is delivering for every Australian because we are a government for all Australians. On July 1, in just 7 days, every Australian taxpayer gets a tax cut. All 13.6 million Australian taxpayers get a tax cut in 7 days. The average tax cut, nearly $1,900 a year, $36 a week extra in your pocket. And unlike those opposite, we want Australians to earn more and keep more of what you earn. What we know is Peter Dutton and the Liberals and the Nationals want you to work longer for less. And, you know, we hear a lot about aspiration from the other side, but we understand aspiration doesn't just start at the top tax break. It doesn't just start at the top tax bracket. That's why our tax cuts travel all the way up the income scale. And we, on this side, are also backing wage rises for low-paid workers. Nearly 2.6 million workers get their third consecutive pay rise backed by the Albanese Labor government. And from next Monday, we are also supporting every household with $300 in energy relief, another policy from the Albanese Labor government. And around 1 million small businesses will receive a $325 off their bills, another cost of living policy from the Albanese Labor government. What have we got from those opposite? Those opposite want to serve up the most expensive form of energy there is in 2 decades' time. In 2 decades' time, that's their answer to how to deal with cost of living and energy supply. They'll go for the most expensive form of energy, and we won't deliver it for 2 decades. And you know what? Mr Dutton won't tell Australians how much his nuclear reactors are going to cost.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. It's really great that Labor is cutting taxes for all Australian taxpayers, not just some, as the opposition had intended. Can you please outline the benefits for all households, in particular for families, and those in our home state of South Australia especially?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Well, Senator Smith would know that we're also freezing the cost of PBS items from July the 1st, delivering stronger Medicare and cheaper medicines. She would also know from Monday paid parental leave increases to 22 weeks and that we are delivering HECS relief for everyone with student debt and increasing Commonwealth rent assistance for nearly a million households. Families with children will pocket an average of more than $3,000 next financial year from our tax cuts. I know, Senator Henderson, you don't like families getting more tax cuts. I know you don't like that, but we actually think it's a good idea.
Senator Henderson, I called you twice and you ignored me, and in fact your voice got louder every single time. You are not in a debate with me, Senator Henderson. You are being incredibly disrespectful, and I request that you listen in silence. Minister Wong.
Families with children, an average of more than $3,000 next financial year. And it's not just families. No taxpayer will miss out. I can tell Senator Smith that in South Australia that's about 900,000 people, and 9 out of 10 of those South Australians will get a bigger tax cut under us.
Thank you. Just a moment, Senator Smith. I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the chamber of a delegation from the National Parliament of Papua New Guinea, led by the Speaker, the Honourable Job Pomat. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a particularly warm welcome to Australia and, of course, to the Senate. Senator Marielle Smith, second supplementary.
President, thank you for your answer, Minister. Could you please tell the Senate more about the Albanese Labor government's power price relief and why the government is delivering renewables that will secure the clean, cheap, reliable and resilient energy system that Australians deserve?
Thank you, Senator Smith. I've just welcomed the delegation. I think you might have come in at the tail end of it, Speaker, but you are most welcome here, and on behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to the Senate. Minister Wong.
Thank you, and I welcome our friends from Papua New Guinea and say how much we appreciated the hospitality last week. Our government, the Albanese Labor government, is delivering power bill relief now. And we all remember how those opposite have consistently opposed power bill relief and raised concerns about who is paying for it, as Senator Henderson said, and they're still yelling about it now. I mean, it's really fascinating, isn't it? These people talk about cost of living, but when they come in here, they're not prepared to back it. And not only are they not prepared to back bill relief, they actually want to make power more expensive. They want to make power more expensive by backing a policy, a technology that will deliver the most expensive power, and worse, it will delay action for 20 years, thereby ensuring that the same fragility of supply that is as a consequence of their inaction
thank you, Minister Wong.
and their
time for
division continues.
Has expired. Senator Duniam.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Wong, and I ask, how much have Australian household energy bills increased since the Albanese government was elected, promising a $275 power price cut?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Well, $300 less as a consequence of the price relief that we have put in place that you don't support. I hear the interjections on that side about why that's a bad idea. They really don't learn, do they? You want to come in here and talk about cheaper energy bills after you have opposed energy price relief really is galling to Australians. You can't pretend that you care about cost of living if you're not prepared to back in the policies that are about dealing with people's cost of living pressures. That's the reality. What we also know from the experts, it is clear that renewables are the cheapest form of new energy. Far cheaper than the nuclear fantasy that you are adopting. An expensive plan which will ensure more delays, less supply in the interim and higher costs for Australians. That's what it means. And what I would say to those opposite, you trash the energy system as a consequence of 22 policies in government, where 24 out of 28—
Minister Wong, Please resume your seat. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. A point of order on relevance, and I was asking the minister exactly how much power prices have increased since the ill-fated promise. We haven't heard one sentence on that.
Thank you, Senator Duniam. I am happy to draw the minister back to the question, but I will also remind senators, if you interject, the senator, whoever's answering, is entitled to take those interjections. And there were lots of interjections which Minister Wong also addressed, which she's entitled to do. Minister Wong.
As I said, a $300 energy bill rebate to every household and an additional energy relief to small businesses. But I would say this. What we know is that under you, 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announced their closure. And what did... So you don't want me to point? OK. What do you... How's that? No, it's fine. Under those opposite, 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announced closures. How many people sought to enter the system? How many? Almost zilch, if any. You know why? Because your division and your inaction and your internal fights and your anti-renewable obsession made sure the market had no certainty. And you know what? You're still at it. You're still at it.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Yes, thanks, President. I wonder if the minister can try and tell us whether household energy bills are going to go up or down under a re-elected Albanese Labor government.
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
I can. Oh, I'll take the interjection from Senator Ruston, who says that they'll just use taxpayers' money to subsidise bills because she's still opposed to the bill relief. It's amazing, isn't it? They just don't learn. They just don't learn. You're prepared to spend billions of dollars on nuclear over 20 years, but you don't want working Australians to get cost relief on their bills. I mean, what sort of priorities is the Liberal Party? What happened to the Liberal Party? The Liberal Party is the party that wants to subsidise an expensive technology which will deliver in 20 years, but wants to fight tooth and nail against giving $300 to Australian families and Australian households.
Order.
It says something about your priorities. We on this side are very clear. We will ensure that we continue to transform this system in accordance with the best advice, not engage in the ideological wars that you are engaged in that increase costs for Australia.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Time has expired. Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Just in the last week, the Australian Energy Market Operator warned, and I quote, "There is potential for gas supply shortfalls due to the depletion of southern storage inventories and that the supply of gas in all or part of the East Coast gas system may be inadequate to meet demand." How will Labor's renewables-only energy plan help to plug these energy shortfalls and reduce electricity prices right now?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Well, let's talk about what AEMO has said. Let's talk about the fact that AEMO has said, the Australian Energy Market Operator has said that the lowest cost plan for a reliable energy grid is Australia's world-leading renewables like solar and wind, firmed with batteries, pumped hydro, flexible gas and transmission reform. I mean, AEMO's advice is that, but you don't want to listen to them. You don't want to listen to them. You want to go down some path that John Howard tried to go down over 20 years ago when he looked at how much a domestic nuclear industry would cost. And it was determined then by then Prime Minister Howard it was too expensive and it would take too long. Too expensive and it would take too long. Peter Dutton, he's like, here he is again, recycling, trying to come up with a plan that even John Howard
Thank you, Minister.
rejected.
The time for answering has expired. Senator McKim.
Well, thanks very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Minister Gallagher. Minister, isn't it the case that implementing a mandatory code of conduct will help redress the power imbalance between supermarkets and their suppliers, but will do nothing at all to bring down the cost of food and groceries for Australian shoppers? Do you agree with the Chair of the ACCC that increasing competition in Australia's supermarket sector would mean cheaper food and groceries for Australian shoppers? And if you do agree with the chair of the ACCC, why won't Labor support the Greens' divestiture bill to create powers to break up the supermarket duopoly and bring down food and grocery prices for Australia's shoppers?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator McKim for the question. And we don't agree with the Greens political party's policy on divestment. We have approached the issue around supermarket prices with a focus on using a range of interventions to ensure that consumers, that those people that go and do their shopping at the supermarket have the information they need. If you saw the Choice report that was released last week, which showed that if you do shop around, you can find savings on your supermarket bills. And I think also the big Woolworths and Coles response to that was interesting as well, because it showed that they were looking at that report and they were responding to that report. So increased information, transparency, funding choice in order to provide that information to consumers is an important part of our plan. But we are also, as you've indicated, announced today on the mandatory food and grocery code and the response to the Emerson Food and Grocery Code review. Our changes will ensure that supermarkets are as competitive as they both and ensure that both consumers and producers get a fair deal. And of course, it is, as I said, part of a broader competition reform agenda which can't be seen in isolation. So we've got the ACCC conducting an inquiry into supermarket prices, we've got the Choice report, we're increasing penalties for anti-competitive conduct, we've banned unfair contract terms, we've got some work underway on mergers reform. This is all part of making sure that we are doing what we can to ease Australians under cost of living pressures and ensure that they are getting the best outcome for their dollar, and including that, ensuring that farmers get a good and fairer deal.
Senator McKim, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, will the government work with the Greens to make corporate price gouging illegal? Or are you content to keep pushing out reports that tell people what they already know, that they're being ripped off by big corporations and you're going to do nothing about it? Why won't Labor make corporate price gouging illegal in Australia?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator McKim for the supplementary. Well, it is illegal for businesses to fix prices or collude with other businesses. It is also illegal for businesses to mislead customers about pricing, and the ACCC is already inquiring at our instigation, as a first government to do so, inquiring into supermarket prices, and we will consider their recommendations. I would also note that the Greens political party's policy on divestiture, which some over there have dabbled with as well and are dancing with as well, Dr Emerson looked at this in his review and he found that it could actually make things worse, not better. If forced divestiture resulted in a supermarket selling some of its stores to another large incumbent, or in forced closure of stores, we might see less competition, not more. So classic Greens response: go for the headline, don't do the hard work that actually underpins and makes the change.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim, second supplementary.
Minister, will Labor commit to rejecting political donations from supermarket corporations who have made billions in crisis profits by price gouging Australian shoppers? Will you back in Australian shoppers who are being price gouged, or will you back in the interests of the price gouging supermarket corporations who donate to the Labor Party?
Senator McKim, as I'm sure you know, that is not a question specifically to the minister's responsibilities. I will, however, call the minister, and it is really her call as to which part of your question she answers or doesn't answer.
Thank you, President. And I note this is a common second supplementary from the Greens political party, where they choose the corporations they don't like as opposed to the ones that they do like, and the ones they don't like, they require a situation where no one's allowed to accept their donations. You'll take your donations from the gambling industry, but you won't take donations from others. Well, my answer to this is the same
Senator
as it
McKim.
always is. The insinuation that you imply with that question is beneath you, and if you have a genuine—
Minister, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
On a point of order, I have let this go over 3 questions now, but there's a constant interjection from Senators McKim and Shoebridge when Senator Gallagher is on her feet, and I'd ask them to desist.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I have called the Senate to order, and I would respectfully remind senators once again, I'll call you to order. You are asked to listen in respectful silence. Minister Gallagher.
There are Commonwealth laws around donations and providing donations through the electoral system, and our position is that all donations need to adhere to those that legislation.
Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. In May, you and the Treasurer made it clear that cost of living relief was your #1 priority when building the budget. We know Australians are feeling the pressure on their household budgets, and one of the key budget pressures for Australians is the weekly grocery shop and the cost of food at the supermarket. Can the Minister please outline what the government is doing to address cost of living pressures, including at the supermarket checkout?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Senator Walsh. I thank you for your question and for the focus that you bring on cost of living and alleviating cost of living pressures on Australian households. We understand very much that Australians are under cost of living pressure, and that and a lot of that pressure is being felt at the checkout. Anyone who does their shopping is seeing how prices have increased over the last 18 months. That's why we commissioned Dr Craig Emerson to review the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct to make sure it is protecting suppliers and encouraging a competitive grocery sector that delivers a fair deal for Australians. The review found that the current voluntary code is failing to address the imbalance of bargaining power between supermarkets and their suppliers, including farmers, and so we are acting immediately. We're strengthening the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct and accepting all recommendations of the independent review into the code. This will mean cracking down on anti-competitive behaviour in the supermarket sector so Australians get fairer prices at the checkout, including making the code mandatory for all supermarkets with an annual Australian revenue of more than $5 billion, commissioning Consumer Group Choice to provide quarterly price reporting, strengthening formal and informal dispute resolution arrangements, introducing penalties for the more harmful breaches of the code, with the maximum penalty the greatest of $10 million, 3 times the benefit gained from the contravening conduct, or 10% of turnover in the preceding 12 months, creating an anonymous supplier and whistleblower complaints mechanism within the ACCC, placing greater emphasis on addressing fear of retribution and improving outcomes for suppliers of fresh produce. This is all about getting a fair go for families at the checkout and a fair go for farmers for their produce. Our plan supports competition, puts downward pressure on prices and gives Australians more choice. This is what a government that's focused on cost of living looks like in action through the work that we have been doing on
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, and it's great to hear about how the government is prioritising cost of living relief for Australians. Another key budget measure was a $300 energy bill rebate for every Australian household and 1 million small businesses. Can the Minister please explain why the government decided it was important to include this energy bill relief in the budget?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Wong.
Minister Gallagher.
Minister Gallagher, sorry.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Walsh, for the supplementary. Well, we know Australians are doing it tough, which is why we're not just acting on grocery prices. We're also looking at ways to ease household budgets, and the relief on energy bills does just that. The big will ensure that our beneficiaries of our new energy rebates and our tax cuts are households right across Australia, and those come into effect in just 7 days' time. President, we're providing $3.5 billion in new energy relief starting on the 1st of July. every Australian household will begin to see $300 credit automatically applied to their electricity bills, and around 1 million small businesses will receive $325 off their bills over the 24-25 year. This new power bill relief doubles the number of eligible households from 5 million to more than 10 million households.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. An energy bill relief will make a significant difference for households and small businesses in my home state of Victoria. Can the minister please explain why a move away from the government's plan to provide cleaner and cheaper energy for all Australians is a risk to every Australian household budget and will add to cost of living pressures?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. Well, the contrast couldn't be starker between our plan and our commitment to cleaner, cheaper energy for all Australians and the risky nuclear reactor gamble of those opposite. From the 1st of July, we're taking $300 off your power bill, real relief starting in 7 days' time. And what are those opposite promising? In 2 decades, that's right, 2 decades, 20 years, Mr Dutton, if it was left to him, will serve up the most expensive form of energy there is and then ask you to pay for it. Unlike those opposite, we understand power prices are a serious issue. Meanwhile, Mr Dutton won't tell Australians how much you'll pay to build his nuclear reactors, how much expensive nuclear reactors will add to your bill, how many nuclear reactors there will be in the Australian community. Meanwhile, the Smart Energy Council's analysis has shown building the 7 nuclear reactors could cost as much as $600 billion of taxpayers' money.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts.
President, my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. The Digital ID Bill was passed with the promise that it would not be compulsory per Section 74, Clause 1. And your bill includes a provision that alternative methods of establishing identity must be provided, Section 74, 1A. My electorate office is receiving complaints from the public who are being required to obtain a digital ID in order to, in one instance, get their own medical report as part of a job application. This was a real-world, not an online application, a real-world application. Minister, what options are available to a person who is not offered an alternative method of identity verification as the Act requires? Where can people complain and what penalties are imposed on an entity who fails to follow your legislation?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Roberts for the question. Well, as you know, Senator Roberts, the digital ID legislation has not come into effect yet. It doesn't come into effect until the 1st of December this year. But the system, essentially we've legislated the existing system, which was unregulated. That's what we've done with that legislation. There is a requirement in the legislation to continue to provide alternate opportunities or ways for people to engage with government for their personal use. Businesses, of course, already engaging with the tax office do use the MyGov ID system, but for your personal use, the law is very clear that there must be alternate ways provided for the community to engage with government. That has been made very clear across government. And I would say if you want to forward me that constituent, I would be issue, even if it's de-identified, I'd be very happy to look at it, but we have been very clear. It is a voluntary system, it is a safe system, it is a secure system, and it's simply a means of verifying yourself in a way that gives you control of your own documentation. So instead of having all your ID photocopied or emailed around the place, that you would be the one verifying your identity and you're able to hold those documents to yourself. It's actually a much safer way of engaging with government than it is through paper-based systems, and I'm very hopeful that more people will take it up once the legislation is in place and the regulator is in place. Of course, once that legislation is enacted, there will be a regulator. The ACCC will perform that role, and so there would be the ability there to make complaints and have those complaints investigated.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. The entity responsible was the Queensland State Government. Will you either now instruct the Queensland Labor government to follow the legislation and ensure an alternative option is allowed, or will you do so after the legislation is enacted?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Yeah, well, the legislation does enable a national digital ID system or ecosystem. There are private sector digital ID and there are also state government versions. But what it would mean, what the legislation means, is that those state governments can apply for accreditation through the national system, but they may, and we're hopeful that they will do that. In fact, on a meeting on Friday I had with states, they are all certainly indicating that they will be part of that national system. But for a state-based system who has their own processes for engaging on rates and other things, that is a matter for the Queensland government and would have to be taken up with the Queensland government.
Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, was the failure to include penalties for not providing alternative verification options a failure of this government, or was the imposition of a mandatory digital ID the plan all along?
Minister Gallagher.
The legislation is very clear. It's a voluntary system. That is, people, for their personal engagement with government, have the right to choose whether they use a digital ID or they use the more traditional way of engaging with government. In terms of penalties, we will be having, and the legislation does set up, the ACCC as the regulator of the system, and that would be the way that complaints and other issues would be assessed. So there is a system in place. I don't have the legislation right in front of me, but we were very clear that putting this in legislation, putting the digital ID ecosystem in legislation, is actually about ensuring that it is safe and that consumers' needs are fundamental, are front and centre and are protected through a regulated system. At the moment, I have a digital ID, but it doesn't exist under a regulated system. So the legislation, all that it did was take a lot of what's happening now outside of a regulated system and regulate it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash.
Question is for the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, under AUKUS, the government is pursuing the acquisition of 8 nuclear-powered submarines. Are these submarines safe for Australian submariners and all who will work on building and sustaining them?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
I have to say, for a senior member of the coalition,
Order. Order. Order.
I think it's interesting that Senator Cash says that calling her a senior member of the coalition is demeaning, but I didn't think that was, but I'll leave that to her. To use something as important as AUKUS, which has bipartisan— May I finish?
Order.
You asked the question.
You asked the question, Senator Cash. To ask a question on a policy which was introduced by your government that has bipartisan support, that goes to the national security and strategic circumstances of this nation, I think is in order to try and utilise it in a domestic debate to cover up the shambles of a policy you have announced, is really not befitting of a party that's serious about national security. It's not befitting, and you and I both know.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, President. And the point of order is in relation to relevance. And whilst I know the Leader of the Government likes to indulge in the odd personal attack, that was not what the question was. It was in relation to making sure Australians understand the government's position in relation to whether the 8 nuclear-powered submarines are actually safe for those working on them.
Thank you, Senator Cash, and I believe the minister is being relevant, and I'll continue to listen carefully.
I have to say, to be told, so the quip about personal attacks, both from a senior member of Peter Dutton's team, our team after the weekend, I have to say, I don't know if that was an attempt at humour, but I think we thought it was quite amusing. Senator, you would be aware that when this policy, the AUKUS position, was announced, your then Prime Minister, and I'm not sure if you were in the National Security Committee at the time, but certainly the decision of your National Security Committee— no, I just can't recall whether she was— that your Prime Minister, Prime Minister Morrison, announced the position of your government, which is that AUKUS would not involve the establishment of a civil nuclear industry. And we went through very carefully the reasons for that.
Thank you, Minister.
And
the
I
time
refer
for answering
to
has
responses.
expired. Senator Cash, first supplement.
Minister, last week a number of government and Labor members of parliament posted social media messages, including the depiction of Australian cartoon character Blinky Bill with 3 eyes, suggesting that nuclear energy generation was unsafe. Will the minister denounce these acts and instruct Labor MPs to cease such juvenile behaviour?
Order. 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 On my left and my right, but particularly my right. Order. Minister Wong.
Well, I'm not sure how that's a supplementary to an AUKUS question, President, but I will. I'm not sure how that's a supplementary to an AUKUS question, President, but I.
Order. 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 Senator Mackenzie, it does apply to you. Minister Wong has questioned whether that is a supplementary question to your first question. On the basis of, I've sought the advice of the clerk, and it is not related to the first question. Okay, so we are talking. It is related. Thank you, Senator Cash. So, Minister Wong.
But I will make this point, that if the senator wishes to talk about responsibility—
Order.
If the senator wishes to talk about responsibility, then perhaps the senator should reflect on utilising AUKUS, which is such a necessary, crucial aspect of our forward plan for the security of our nation, in a domestic political debate. We are working very hard.
Senator Ruston, order. Order. Senator Ruston, if that was a personal reflection on the minister, I am going to ask you to withdraw that. Thank you. Minister Wong, please continue. Have you time? Thank you. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. And Minister, won't nuclear scare campaigns make it harder to recruit the thousands of people that Australia needs to build, operate and sustain nuclear submarines? Why is the Prime Minister, with this lighten-up attitude, condoning the playing of politics with our national security needs?
I'm waiting for order until order on my right and my left. Order. Senator Cash, you've asked the question. I'm waiting for silence before I call the minister. Minister Wong.
Well, President, what I would say to senior members of the coalition— I love you too. What I would say to senior members of the coalition is that we are very happy to have bipartisanship on the largest undertaking Australia has ever taken, largest undertaking this country has ever taken, both as a proportion of GDP and in nominal figures, and in terms of the sheer scale of the task. And I would have hoped that despite whatever debate we have about energy, that there might be some modicum of responsibility from the people who want to run this country on national security. But it is clear, as Mr Dutton was on the PM, that they have no line and they're prepared to try and play politics with our national security. We are not.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Cox.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Leader of the Government, representing the Prime Minister. The opposition Leader's nuclear fantasy is nothing but a massive distraction to the real work of keeping coal and gas in the ground. This is the only way to prevent a catastrophic climate breakdown over this critical decade. Given that both the government and the opposition are on a unity ticket and expanding coal and the gas industry and making the climate crisis worse, is this government rubbing its hands together in this fantasyland nuclear distraction?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I would make a few points. The first is we take the best advice we can from experts about the way we transition this economy, and in particular the energy grid, in a way that increases reliability of supply, increases supply and reduces emissions. And I know that there will be aspects of what AEMO says, the energy market operator, or other experts say that don't accord with the Greens' position, but that is the advice we are given, which is that how do we ensure that we reduce emissions from Australia's energy grid as part of our net zero policy, target approach in a way that ensures we increase the renewable supply, we reduce cost and we increase reliability, and that is what we are doing. As you say, you described the opposition's position as a fantasy. I have to say, I think it's a blank cheque for a bad bet, because what it does is it says we will subsidise a policy approach which might yield something in 20 years, and we won't even tell taxpayers what the cost is of ensuring the most expensive power that we can find, So we are very clear that what we want to do is to transition the grid and the whole of the Australian economy at the lowest cost we can to meet our 2030 target and our 2050 net zero target, which I understood was bipartisan. And we think that is the most responsible approach. I appreciate that the Greens political party have different views about different energy sources.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cox first, supplementary.
Thank you, President. For generations, First Nations people in this country have been opposing coal and gas projects on their country. From the Tiwi Islands, Gomeroi country, Nurulungi and Gunditjmara country, they have all been opposed to these climate-destroying projects to protect and defend their country and its connection to it. This is a government who said they would listen to First Nations voices. When are you actually going to do that?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, we have a very clear and deep and personal commitment to listening and engaging with First Nations communities, and we're very proud to have the members of our First Nations caucus with us. And what I would say in terms of approvals, that Ms Plibersek, because I think this is an EPBC Act question, Ms Plibersek has made clear the importance of going through a process of discussion and negotiation with all parties as we look to what further reforms are required in these areas. I would also make the point that this government has, in fact, speaking in relation to your primary question, approved some 54 renewable projects.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Cox, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. At the May 2022 election, this government told the Australian public they were serious about delivering on climate action. Minister, why has your government then produced two plans, Future Gas and Future Made in Australia, that all have us baked into gas until 2070? And in fact, they look like a reheated version of the Morrison government's gas-fired recovery policy.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Wong.
With respect, Senator, that last comment is a throwaway political comment that actually has no basis in fact. And I don't think anybody looking at our policy approach would say that. I'm sorry, I know that it's part of the political strategy to try and make the two big parties the same, but unfortunately here the facts do get in the way. What I have said very clearly and what has been said by the Prime Minister, and more importantly on this issue, more recently on this issue, the Climate Change Minister, we look to what is the best way, the most efficient way to transition our economy to meet what are very ambitious targets, and they are ambitious. And it might be that in some world you can theoretically just somehow get to net zero or to 43% reduction or to in excess of 80% renewables in the grid by just announcing it, but we have the hard work of making sure we deliver policies that enable that transition
Minister. The time
at
for
lowest cost
answering
to
has
Australian
expired. Senator Sheldon.
Good, thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister Watt. And that since taking office, the Albanese Labor government has been focused on getting wages moving and easing cost of living pressures after a decade-long race to the bottom on wages under the Liberals and Nationals. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring Australian workers earn more and keep more of what they earn?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sheldon, who, along with many senators on this side of the chamber, including our new Senator, Senator Darmanin, has spent a working life standing up for working people in this country. Under Labor, people are earning more and keeping more of what they earn. We are delivering for every Australian because we are a government for all Australians. Today it is 7 days till the 1st of July. And why does that matter? Because that's 7 days until every Australian taxpayer gets a tax cut. It's 7 days until our $300 energy bill relief begins. And it's 7 days until 2.6 million low-paid workers get their third consecutive pay rise backed by this government. We are providing cost-of-living support while putting downward pressure on inflation. We're also strengthening the Food and Grocery Code for a fair go for families and farmers. Unlike the opposition, we believe that strong wages growth is a key part of providing cost-of-living relief. We've closed loopholes that undercut wages and working conditions for working Australians. We've modernised our bargaining system to get wages moving again, especially for those in feminised industries. We've backed in pay rises for workers on the minimum wage and awards at the Fair Work Commission 3 times since coming to government. Because of the Albanese government's changes, wage growth is above the rate of inflation at 3.6% over the year, and it is expected to continue. The gender pay gap is also at a record low of 12%, and almost 880,000 jobs have been created under this government, around 250,000 of which were full-time jobs for women. Now, of course, that contrasts with the previous coalition government, which kept wages low as a deliberate design feature of their economic architecture. The coalition never once backed in pay rises for minimum wage and award earners, and now in opposition, the coalition have voted against almost every one of our workplace relations measures to ease cost of living pressures for Australians.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Sheldon, first supplementary.
Thank you for that answer, Minister. Given the Liberals and Nationals suggested that asking for a real pay rise for low-paid workers is just, as they say, window dressing, how is the Albanese government supporting all Australians, including our lowest paid workers, address cost of living pressures?
Minister.
Thanks again, Senator Sheldon. Well, this government's workplace relations agenda is helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn with secure jobs, better pay and safer workplaces. We're also addressing the pressures that people are facing at the checkout by strengthening the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct and establishing an ACCC review into supermarket behaviour. For too long, we've seen big supermarkets take advantage of farmers right across the country, not provide them with a fair price, but then actually charge consumers much more than what they're actually paying farmers. We're fixing this by making the Code of Conduct mandatory and by introducing fines of up to $10 million for each breach. The Coalition, who claim to be the friends of farmers, had 10 years to fix this, but they did nothing. And when our lowest paid workers get a pay rise, Barnaby Joyce dismisses it as mere window dressing. Whether it's farmers or families, Peter Dutton and the Coalition want Australians to work longer for less. Under Labor, Australians are earning more and keeping more of what they earn.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Minister Watt, I do remind you when referring to others in the other place, use their correct titles. Senator Sheldon, second supplementary.
Good, thanks, Minister. And as you point out, $110 extra in the minimum wage increase is mere window dressing for some, but it's food on the table for many. I note that the Liberals and Nationals have committed to a targeted package of repeals to the government's workplace relations changes, and an expensive energy policy that won't deliver much-needed cost-of-living relief for 2 decades. How are the Albanese government reforms helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn while relieving cost-of-living pressures? And why are these reforms so
Sheldon,
important?
your time is up. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. Well, the Albanese government's #1 focus is easing the cost-of-living pressures for Australians. After a decade of deliberate wage stagnation and suppression under the Coalition, our changes have helped deliver faster than expected annual real wage growth to workers while also targeting inflation. We're also taking $300 off household power bills and investing in renewables, which are the cheapest form of energy, and getting more renewables in our power system will bring prices down. In contrast, Mr Dutton wants Australians to pay more for his risky nuclear reactors and pay more for their power. And even though we saw Senator Davey make a valiant attempt to try to stand up for communities who opposed reactors, they'll be imposed on them anyway. These reactors cost a lot more than renewables, they take longer to build, and at the end of it, family power bills will be even higher. And we know the Senate leader, Senator Birmingham, knows that, because over the weekend he was quoted as saying that renewables have become more cost competitive. Good on you, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you,
You're
Minister
on the right
Watt.
path.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham.
Here I am. Thanks, President. President, my question is and directed to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Industry and Science, Senator Farrell. Minister, what percentage of the world's uranium deposits are located in Australia, and what percentage of global uranium does Australia supply?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank Senator Birmingham for his question. Look, I don't know the answers to that off the top of my head, and I'm happy to very happy to speak to the Minister for Resources to get those accurate figures. I am aware that, of course, South Australia has very significant levels of uranium, and I'm sort of very pleased to hear that it looks like BHP is taking some steps to increase its extraction of uranium, gold and copper. Yes, I'm sure it will be a safe extraction. But no, South Australia does have significant amounts of uranium, and of course we export that uranium safely to the world.
Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, Minister, and President, and thank the Minister. Noting in particular the Minister's reference to BHP Billiton's expansion plans for Olympic Dam, as well as other aspirations, including in Western Australia, for the uranium industry, does the Minister wish to see more Australian uranium mined and used around the world?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Sorry, I was just getting an answer to your previous question, Senator Birmingham. If you could just repeat that last question so I could hear it again. We produce 28%.
Well, if you take your seat, Senator Farrell, I'll get Senator Birmingham to repeat the last piece, which was about exporting uranium, I think.
Thank you, President. I can repeat the supplementary question for Senator Farrell. He can, of course, add to his answer at the conclusion of question time, which will be as soon as he finishes too. President, the question was whether the Minister wishes to see more Australian uranium mined and more Australian uranium used around the world?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Yes.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. I welcome that answer by the Minister. The Minerals Council of Australia have stated that, and I quote, Australia's strong global reputation for non-proliferation and its world-class uranium industry, which includes almost a third of global uranium reserves and supplies around 10% of global uranium used for zero emissions electricity, positions it well to lead in nuclear energy development, adding that it is time to move beyond outdated anti-nuclear sentiments. Does the minister disagree with any aspects of the MCA's statement?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, thank you, President, and thanks Senator Birmingham for his second supplementary question. Senator Birmingham, the reason we have a ban on nuclear energy in this country is not anything that the Labor Party has done in government. It's as a result of a grubby deal. As a result of a grubby, it's as a result of a grubby deal by former Prime Minister John Howard to get the GST through this Parliament. We have a ban on nuclear energy. The Labor Party will continue with that ban. The Labor Party will continue the policy. Will continue with the policy.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask the further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you.